Hey everyone, today we're going to be starting to talk about multiplying and dividing rational expressions. And honestly, today what we're going to do is set the framework for that by reviewing some things that we're going to need to know in order to multiply and divide rational expressions, and also just doing some simplifying of a single rational expression. So let's first review simplifying fractions. And we do this all the time, but I just want to go ahead and make sure that everyone has it fresh in their mind. So if you see the 35 over 45, and you think to yourself, I want to simplify this and make it as small as possible, you might realize that 35 is 7 times 5 and 45 is 9 times 5. And if we have that 5 in the top and bottom, those will cancel to 1 because anything divided by itself is 1, and we'll be left with 7 over 9. Those don't have anything in common, so we're good to go. Next, let's look at 27 over 54, and why don't you pause the video and try that one on your own and come back to double check. Okay, so 27 and 54 actually have a 27 in common. You might have realized that they had a 3 or a 9 in common and taken that out to start, but you need to do the simplest form. So if you only took out a 9 or a 3, you need to take out the other one because the whole thing can be reduced to a 1/2. Let's go ahead and review factoring because we are going to extensively use factoring when we are multiplying and dividing rational expressions. Remember that we always have to look for a greatest common factor first, so we'll be doing that. And this first one, x squared minus 3x minus 28, well, that has an a value of 1, a b value of negative 3, and a c value of negative 28. And I don't see anything that these have in common. There is no greatest common factor. So let's just make ourselves a note that there is no GCF. So we will just proceed with doing our X box. Let's remind ourselves that the top of the X box is A times C and the bottom is our B value. So 1 times negative 28 is negative 28 and my B value is negative 3. Let's talk about factors of negative 28 that will add to a negative 3. I will need my bigger factor to be negative, which I typically write on the right-hand side, because I have that negative 3 here. I know that they need to add to a negative number. So I'm going to start with 1 and negative 28, 2 and negative 14, 3 won't divide evenly, but 4, and negative 7. And the two factors that are going to add to be negative 3, well, that's negative 7 and 4. So let's put those here, and now we're ready to do our box. Remember that our first term and last term go in the first and last spots in our box, and the two numbers that just solved our X puzzle get an X tacked onto them, and they go in the other boxes. Now let's look at a greatest common factor across the top, across the bottom, and then down the two columns. So for here, I'm going to do x squared and a negative 7x. Well, those have an x in common. 4x and negative 28 is a 4. X squared and 4x, that's an x again. And negative 7x and 28, those have a negative 7 in common. Not just because there's a negative in both of them, but specifically because there is a negative in this box here that I'm about to write next to. Remember that that dictates our sign, and in this case I see a negative 7, so I'm going to write negative 7. So these are our factors, x plus 4 and x minus 7. So let's go ahead and write those. X minus 7 and x plus 4. Now we are just factoring today. We are not going to set this equal to 0 and actually solve. Let's go ahead and look at the next one. And I want to look for a greatest common factor. And I notice that my A value is a 2, B value is negative 12, and then I have a positive 18. Well, 2 will divide into all of those evenly, so I have a GCF equal to 2. So the first thing I'm going to do is divide everything by 2 and pull that out to the front and say what I have left, which is x squared. I'm going to go ahead and write a 1 there in front of the x squared to remind me, minus 6x and plus 9. And label this as A, B, and C. And I'm ready to do my x box again. 9, negative 6, and I want to look for factors of positive 9, but they add to be negative 6. This time I'm going to need 2 negatives because that's the only way that I can multiply to a positive number but add to a negative number. So everything I write needs to be negative. Negative 1, negative 9, or negative 3, negative 3. And the two that are going to solve my x puzzle, negative 3 and negative 3. Let's go ahead and do our box now. X squared and 9. And then our x puzzle gave us negative 3x and negative 3x. We'll have an x, a negative 3 because of the negative on the box that we're writing next to, another x, and another negative 3. So our final factor form, x minus 3 times x minus 3 from our x box, but don't forget that we factored out a 2 to start with, and that is part of our final factored form. Do not forget that. It's really easy to do. You get so focused on doing your x box that you forget what you started with, which was the greatest common factor.